your building, it gets a lot of sunlight coming in, which is good because you don't need electrical lighting. However, there's a lot of solar heat gain coming through that glass. So the technology of that glass is very crucial at this point, right? So we advise our clients to kind of consider these things from a sustainability perspective, from a heating and cooling perspective, from an efficiency perspective. So these parameters, we always kind of have to understand how they interact with building systems. Again, I mentioned daylighting. There's nothing better than having natural light than using electrical light, right? You not only are you using passive strategies for that reason, but you're also reducing energy consumption by using fossil fuels. And if you use electricity based on fossil fuels, you have to pay it. So why pay it if you can design your building in a way that it uses natural light, right? So these are the types of advice and consultation we work with our clients for in early stages of the new building design and construction. Because if it's an existing building, you can't really do anything about it because the building is already there. But there are other opportunities you look at from that perspective. So heating, hot and cold, right? You want the cold, if you're cooling your space, you want the coolness to stay here because you don't want it to dissipate. But if you have cracks and gaps through your windows and your doors, the cool air will exit. And you're wasting money, you're wasting nice, effective investment you've made to cool your space. Heating as well, right? During the winter time, if you're heating your space, you don't want the heat to leave your building. So these are the types of conversations we have with them. Wind, huge impact, right? And that's also a huge factor that we also discuss with clients. Now, the performance of your build, from our perspective, when we do consulting, the performance of the building touches on different disciplines, as I mentioned. It's multidisciplinary. And the building envelope, every building has a perimeter, right? The building envelope is primarily focused on by the architect, meaning the roof, the windows, the doors. The roof, the windows, the doors, the exterior walls. When you design a new building and your exterior walls are thermally insulated, meaning all the different layers of the wall, the insulation, the plywood, the studs, and the different compartments that are within the building envelope, if they're designed with efficient, sustainable materials that doesn't allow heat gain and heat loss, you're going to have a very thermally efficient building. Interestingly enough, architects know how to design buildings very effectively. But you also have technologies that come into the market, and when corporations build these materials and build these technologies, if it's efficient, whether it's not efficient, they're going to push it into the market. If you buy an efficient insulation, you install it in your building because it's cheap, you're not only making that decision today, that decision is going to stay there because that building is going to stay there for 100 years, right? So you're going to be, from an operation perspective, you're going to be spending a lot of money. When we advise, we work with architects so we can look at existing efficient materials in the market that they can integrate into the building design and the construction process, but also because some of those materials have been sustainably sourced, right? They're using material that's local to the community that maybe could be sourced from 200 miles away rather than being flown from China, because there's a lot of GHG emissions that's associated with that. So from a sustainability perspective, we try to advise our clients on their construction projects to use mostly locally sourced or regionally sourced products. Mechanical systems. So here, basically, if you have an efficient building envelope, then you don't need a big mechanical system, meaning you don't have to oversize your system to heat and cool your space, because already the building envelope is efficient enough. So we always look at opportunities from the building envelope by talking to the architect, and then when we work with the mechanical design engineering teams, they can scale down the sizing of their systems from a heating and cooling perspective. So there's a lot of interaction going on between our company and all these different other disciplines that we collaborate with on our projects. Lighting has a huge effect on energy use in a building, right? If you have inefficient lighting, it's going to consume a lot of energy. So we look at LED lighting technologies, we look at halogen lighting technologies. If a building has incandescent light bulb, which is highly inefficient, we would advise not to use that. If they have, let's say, a T12 fluorescent light bulb, which is an older technology, we advise don't use it. Use something that's a lot more efficient, which is like a T8 or a T5. But when we advise from that capacity, we also work with lighting designers, because that's what lighting designers do professionally. But from a sustainability perspective, we see things differently, and we do also share our advice on that. Again, our firm is a multidisciplinary firm. We don't necessarily make these decisions in a vacuum. We consult with our client first, because they're the ones that's paying everybody on the project. And we advise the different disciplines. They're experts in what they do, but we're also experts in what we do. But we have to make sure that, because we work with all of them, we have to make sure that we have a full, comprehensive understanding of how these different systems interact. So, again, I mentioned we focus on both new construction projects and existing buildings. And each of these different line of strategies, they have similarities, but they also have differences. So for new construction, during the design phase, this is when the building owner or the developer has an idea of, I want to build a commercial building. The commercial building is going to have a grocery store in the basement, or the first floor, or it's going to have a community garden on the roof. And then during this design phase, then we basically work with, the developer will bring us on board, then we start working with the architect, and then we start advising them on how to integrate sustainability design, sustainability strategies into those choices that they're making. So, and that goes from the building perimeter, again, the core construction, which is the mechanical core construction, meaning what's inside, the mechanical system, the lighting systems, and the like. And then once construction is finished, this typically takes 24 months if it's a smaller building, or even longer if it's a large building. Right now, we're working on a project of 3 multifamily high-rise buildings, and each one of them are 60,000 square feet. And they have a construction cycle of 22 months for all 3 of them. So one of the key things we also do, we do energy modeling. How many of you are familiar with energy modeling, or modeling of any type, any sort? Right? So as part of sort of projecting an energy profile for a building that's not designed yet, right? That is intended to give the owner and the project team an idea of how efficient this building is going to be when you design it. And what we do is we take the architect's floor plan, which they give us of the design, we integrate it into an energy modeling software. We basically model the building based on how the architect is designing it. And then the parameters for all the components that we use is if the architect designs to, if the decision says use an efficient window, if that window has to have a solar heat gain coefficient, which is a parameter, it's a metric that shows how efficient a glass is and how inefficient it is. We input it into the model. So that's kind of what tells us how sustainable or how energy efficient or how much of a high performing building this building is going to be once it gets constructed. And at occupancy, when the building construction ends, this is where we actually start interacting with the occupants, because we have to live in these buildings. And if you design an efficient building and you don't educate and train the people who are living in it, you haven't really completed your job, right? Because they need to understand the efficient systems that are in there, how to use it, and how to maintain it. Because the sustainability isn't about just doing the job once and letting it go. It's a continuous performance improvement. And that's the only way how the owner can keep reducing their operational cost and also be able to reduce their carbon footprint and do good for the environment. And also for human health and well-being for the occupants, they're also doing things in a way, they're going to understand that this let's say the carpet that's used in that building, the carpet has been sustainably sourced, the carpet doesn't have volatile organic compounds that might be detrimental to occupants who are in the building that have asthma or maybe they're an older person and their chemicals, you know, are you guys familiar with off-gassing? Off-gassing is basically the scent that you get from when you buy a new car and you sit in the car, you can smell the chemicals, right? When you paint a new house, you go into the house, you can smell that paint, the fumes coming from that. Same thing when you install new carpets. So we actually advise the developer, the building owner, during the construction process, when they're buying carpets, we say, don't buy this carpet because this carpet is not certified by the certifying body that makes the carpet sustainable because it didn't use chemicals XYZ. So we do that for the developer when the building gets occupied. We also offer to train the occupants so they understand how sustainable their building is and what they need to do to maintain it.